Imagine spending 46 years in a prison cell for a crime you never committed. As the world outside changes, your life remains frozen behind the prison walls, like a framed photograph nailed to the wall, unmoving for nearly half a century. This is the story of Richard Phillips, the man who holds the record for being wrongly imprisoned for the longest time in American history. Today, we bring you this heartbreaking yet inspiring story. It's a tale of a broken justice system that stole 46 years from an innocent man. But even behind those prison walls, Richard never gave up his fight for freedom. This is a story of injustice, perseverance, and ultimately, justice prevailing. Join us as we delve into the incredible journey of Richard Phillips in today's episode of Remarkable Stories. If you find this story meaningful, don't forget to share, subscribe, and leave a comment. On the morning of September 6, 1971, Richard Phillips' life took a devastating turn. In Ferndale, Michigan, a small party store was robbed by two armed individuals. The store owner and his 12-year-old son described the robbers as one white man and one black man. The black robber was said to be about 5 feet 8 inches tall, with brown eyes and short curly hair. The robbers made off with only $10 from the cash register. That very day, 25-year-old Richard Phillips was arrested in Detroit along with Fred Mitchell on suspicion of possessing drugs. While no drugs were found, Mitchell accused Phillips of being involved in the same party store robbery. Soon after, the store owner and his son identified Phillips as one of the robbers during a police lineup. This, despite Phillips being 6 feet tall with long hair, a description that did not match their initial statement. From that moment, Richard Phillips' nightmare began. Phillips was offered the chance to take a polygraph test to prove his innocence. He firmly denied any involvement, but the examiner deemed him deceptive. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, the witness's testimony in court sealed his fate. On November 9, 1971, Richard Phillips was convicted of armed robbery and sentenced to 7 to up to 22.5 years in prison. But this was only the beginning of a journey that would span decades of suffering and injustice. On March 3, 1972, the body of Gregory Harris was discovered in a wooded area near Troy, Michigan. Harris had been missing since 1971. His car, with bloodstains on the seat, had been cleaned before investigators could properly collect evidence. A few days after Harris's body was found, Fred Mitchell, the same man with a history of violent crimes, accused Richard Phillips and Fred Palumbo of Harris's murder. Mitchell claimed he overheard the two discussing Harris's murder. Despite there being no physical evidence linking Phillips to the crime, Mitchell's statement became a key piece of the prosecution's case. The authorities seemed determined to close the case, even if it meant relying on the testimony of a man known for lying. Imagine being Richard Phillips, already wrongly convicted of a robbery, and now facing murder charges based solely on the word of someone with a questionable history and motives. There was no evidence, no witnesses to corroborate Mitchell's story, only his statement. Yet, in the eyes of the justice system, that was enough. During the 1972 trial, Mitchell served as the star witness. He claimed that there had been a dispute between Phillips and Harris over drugs, which escalated into Harris's murder, allegedly carried out by Phillips and Palumbo. This false testimony sealed Phillips' fate once again, deepening the wounds inflicted by a broken system. But there was no evidence to support this theory, and even Palumbo's father testified that the alleged drug dealer never existed. The jury took only 4 hours to reach a verdict, finding both men guilty of first-degree murder. Before sentencing, Phillips repeatedly maintained his innocence, but with no evidence to prove it, he had no choice but to wait for justice. On October 5, 1972, Richard Phillips and Fred Palumbo were convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. There was no second chance. A single iron door closed in front of Richard Phillips, and he felt as if his future had come to an end. Prison life was extremely harsh. Phillips witnessed suicides and violent incidents with his own eyes, yet he never lost hope. During his decades behind bars, he found solace in poetry, music, and small acts of volunteering. To spare his family from pain, he chose to cut ties and remain out of contact with them. To express his emotions, he turned to poetry, pouring his suffering into his words. Around 1990, after spending nearly 19 years in prison, Richard Phillips shifted his focus from poetry to painting. He taught himself various art techniques using books from the prison library. Phillips was inspired by Vincent van Gogh, relating to his struggles. In prison, he created around 400 paintings, many influenced by images from books and magazines. Immersed in jazz music, he found solace in his artwork, often sending his paintings to his pen friend, Doreen Cromartie. Despite expressing his emotions through art, Phillips never stopped fighting to prove his innocence. He repeatedly filed appeals, hoping for justice, but the legal system continued to fail him. Even when new hearings were ordered, courts overturned them due to a lack of strong evidence. Yet, he never gave up. After nearly 38 years in prison, things changed in 2010. Fred Palumbo finally testified, admitting that he and Fred Mitchell had committed the murder of Gregory Harris and that Phillips had no involvement. Palumbo revealed that Mitchell had falsely implicated Phillips in the Ferndale robbery, leading to his wrongful conviction. Palumbo confessed that he had remained silent out of fear, as Mitchell had threatened both him and his family. On August 24, 2010, during a court hearing, Palumbo retracted his previous false statement and revealed the truth. According to Palumbo, in 1970, while serving their sentences at the Michigan Reformatory, he and Fred Mitchell worked together in the prison kitchen and became close friends. Mitchell wanted revenge on two men who had stolen $500 from his mother. Among them, he suspected George Harris. After their release, Mitchell and Palumbo initially planned to rob a store, but Palumbo backed out due to a lack of a getaway car. Later, Mitchell met Gregory Harris and got into a car with him, having already set a trap. During the ride, Mitchell suddenly shot Harris. Shocked, Palumbo, out of fear, helped dispose of the body. Palumbo's shocking testimony exposed Mitchell's crime, one that had forced Richard Phillips to spend 4 decades in prison for a crime he never committed. With the new evidence, the Michigan Innocence Clinic stepped in to help Richard Phillips. They launched their own investigation, and in 2015, a polygraph test confirmed that Phillips was telling the truth. After proving that he had no involvement in the crime, a petition for case review was filed in 2016. Richard was released on bond, and finally, in 2017, after almost 46 years, the judge accepted his petition, granting him release. Though delayed, justice had finally started to move in his favor. Even after being released on bond, freedom was not easy for Richard. The world had changed completely. He had no job, no home, and no money. He stayed with a friend he met in prison, struggling to adjust to his new life. But then, something miraculous happened. His longtime pen pal, Doreen Cromartie, had preserved all 400 of his paintings. When no one else believed in him, she stood by his side knowing he would one day return for them, and he did. With the support of new friends, Phillips' artwork reached the public. His first gallery exhibition was a massive success. Having never sold a painting before, he initially priced them at $500 each. 20 paintings sold that very night. More exhibitions followed, and soon, his paintings were selling for up to $5,000. The emotions he once poured into his art in prison had transformed into something beautiful and valuable. In 2018, the Wayne County Conviction Integrity Unit re-examined Richard Phillips's case. Their investigation revealed that Fred Mitchell's testimony was completely unreliable and full of contradictions. Mitchell had claimed he overheard Phillips and Palumbo planning the murder in June 1971. However, records confirmed that Palumbo was still in prison at that time, making Mitchell's statement impossible. Additionally, Phillips and Palumbo had never even met until July 4, 1971, 8 days after the crime, at a barbecue hosted at Mitchell's house. Prison records further verified Palumbo's timeline, proving that Mitchell's testimony was entirely false. March 28, 2018, after 46 years, the truth was finally acknowledged. The Wayne County Prosecutor's Office admitted its mistake and declared Richard Phillips innocent. The murder charges against him were dismissed and he was fully exonerated. In May 2019, Phillips received $1,565,479 in compensation for his wrongful conviction, but his fight for justice wasn't over. The Michigan Innocence Clinic continued investigating his armed robbery case. In 2022, the Oakland County Conviction Integrity Unit reviewed the Ferndale robbery case. Their findings revealed Phillips was innocent. Mistaken identity and Palumbo's sworn statement proved Phillips had no involvement in the crime. On September 28, 2022, the court vacated his robbery conviction, clearing him of all charges. In 2023, he was awarded $735,088 for his wrongful robbery conviction. Justice finally prevailed, but only after 46 years. In the US, an estimated 2% to 5% of prisoners are wrongfully convicted, meaning tens of thousands of innocent people are behind bars. Since 1989, over 3,300 individuals have been exonerated and freed. Wrongful convictions destroy lives, yet many states lack compensation laws for the wrongly imprisoned. Even where compensation exists, it is difficult to obtain, with an average payout of around $50,000 per year. Organizations like the Innocence Project and the National Registry of Exonerations work to reform the justice system, prevent future injustices, and advocate for legal changes to address these failures. Richard Phillips spent 46 years in prison for crimes he did not commit, losing nearly half a century of his life. For this injustice, he was awarded around $2.3 million in compensation. But can 46 years of lost freedom ever truly have a price? When broken down annually, this amounts to less than $52,000 per year, barely covering lost income, let alone the mental anguish, lost family moments, and shattered dreams he endured. Even receiving compensation was not easy. Phillips had to navigate legal and bureaucratic obstacles to get what little justice the system could offer. No amount of money can restore stolen time, reunite broken families, or erase the scars of wrongful imprisonment. His children grew up without him. His daughter in France refused to meet him, and his son barely recognized him. 46 years later, their reunion was distant and awkward, as time had turned them into strangers. While financial compensation helps, it cannot heal the deepest wounds. Richard's story raises a haunting question. Can any system truly make up for such an injustice? Or are we just trying to put a price on a life that was never ours to take? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Richard Phillips is now nearly 80 years old. His story is a remarkable symbol of patience and hope. Despite spending 46 years in prison for a crime he didn't commit, he never gave up the fight for the truth. His freedom serves as a reminder of the flaws in our justice system, highlighting the urgent need for fairness to ensure such an injustice is never repeated. With that, we have come to the end of today's episode. Share your thoughts in the comments section below. Till we meet again, take care and keep listening and sharing some stories.